My name is Mike Williams. I'm the Director of Investigations at Homeland Security for the Sheriff's Office. We're here today to talk about actually 3 cases. I'm going to talk about 2, and I'm going to turn it over to Chief Tom Hackney to talk about the 3rd. The first 2 are homicide cases, homicide cold cases that we've solved recently. And I want to give you a quick synopsis of these cases and move through some of the details and tell you where we got to where we are today. In 2011, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office applied for a federal grant to offset the cost of running DNA testing on unsolved homicide cases. 2 of the cases that we're going to talk about today are cases that we've utilized that grant to solve. The first case is the case of Michael Bowie. Michael Bowie was a homicide victim who was shot and killed during a home invasion robbery in May of 1998. This case involved several other victims. It was a very complicated case. One of the females in this case was sexually assaulted by the suspects. No suspect information was ever developed, and that case eventually went cold. In March of last year, 2012, as part of the DNA cold case grant, detectives reviewed the homicide case of Michael Bowie. And in that review, they determined that there were some items that could be submitted utilizing today's technology to reevaluate some of this evidence and potentially develop some profiles. In July, we submitted 2 pieces of evidence for processing, and in August, we received from DNA Labs International some results that showed that we actually had a DNA male profile on both items that we submitted. That profile was uploaded that same month in August into the FDLE database, CODIS. In November of last year, we received a report from FDLE that we had a match between a DNA profile obtained from those 2 samples and a qualifying offender profile. And that profile matched that of Michael Franklin. In February of this year, the grand jury heard charges and they returned an indictment for Michael Franklin. The Criminal Apprehension Unit of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office located and tracked down Michael Franklin in March of this year. Michael Franklin was charged with first-degree murder, armed robbery, armed burglary with assault and battery, sexual battery, and kidnapping, and is currently in jail on those charges. And that is the first case that we want to talk about. The second case is the case of Andrea Clements. This case is a homicide from 1999. In February of that year, 40-year-old Andrea Clements was discovered deceased in a motel room at the Palms Motel in the 5100 block of North Main Street. Ms. Clements had been strangled and her death was classified as a homicide. During the initial investigation, several items of evidence were submitted to FDLE. However, once again, no suspect information could be developed, and that case also eventually went cold. In 2008, we were notified that 1 item of evidence we had submitted in 1999 had actually come back to a known offender in the National DNA Database. So we reopened that case, and through 2009 and parts of 2012, we submitted additional items of evidence that were from the original crime scene to again, utilize new technology to hope to identify those profiles, those male profiles that we hope to find. As a direct result of that forensic examination and additional investigative interviews in December of last year, which is December of 12, we arrested Michael Jerome Williams for the murder and sexual battery of Andrea Clements. At the time of his arrest, Mr. Williams was incarcerated for a 1999 murder he had committed in Georgia, and he was and is serving a life sentence in Georgia for that murder. So those are the 2 cases that we want to highlight on this cold case grant. Again, we received that grant in 2011. We are using that obviously for DNA testing of unsolved homicide cases. We've got about 500 homicide and/or sexual battery cases that we're using this grant for. We're about halfway through that number, and we've got about 78 cases that we believe we can utilize this grant for to hopefully identify some additional profiles and lead to closing these cases and making arrests. I do want to highlight that the grant is obviously good for us, and we're doing a lot of good work with it, but the men and women in the homicide unit are doing a fantastic job every day of following down these leads and utilizing this grant the way it was supposed to be utilized and solving these cases. We are, bringing closure to these victims' families, which is important to us, and also, we hope to, with those 78 cases in the queue, hope to be standing before you many more times this year with cold cases that we've solved based on this grant and the hard work of those men and women in the homicide unit. So with that, I'll open it up to a couple of questions on these cases.
So along with the suspects that are now in custody, were you able to determine motive behind either of the
Some of these cases are still, we'll still interview and do some things like that to wrap that case up, but at this point, they're closed from an arrest standpoint. We've got what we need, and we're moving forward with the charges.
Has Franklin been free all this time, or has he been in jail?
Franklin has been free, and he was arrested again in March of this year. March 22nd, we made that arrest.
Is there any other suspects in this terror, night of sexual terror slang?
There was another suspect. He's not yet identified, and we're continuing to work on that.
On the cost of this DNA grant, any idea, is this saving us money, manpower, and all these cold cases now being closed up?
I think it's stuff that we would not probably be able to do without this grant. We would not be able to close these cases and do the extra work that we need without this grant. So it's a benefit for us.
How much was the grant for?
$500,000.
Any other questions?
Yes. Just give me a second to go to complicated cases. In 2008, this case, you had some items of evidence that you said were tested. What item of evidence was that? This is the Clemens strangulation.
There were some items, some blood evidence, some things like that. I won't get into too much detail, but some blood evidence that was tested for DNA, and obviously we were able to reevaluate and retest that evidence with the new DNA technology. So we were able to get a profile. In the past, we couldn't do that.
The murder that he has been convicted of and is in jail for already, in terms of a timeline, was that before or after this incident?
He committed that murder 1 month prior to the murder he committed here in Jacksonville. He fled Georgia to Jacksonville, where he committed the murder of Adrian Clemens.
Any other questions?
Michael Franklin, wasn't he in jail for 9 years though?
He was in jail. He was out when we made this arrest. Absolutely correct.
All right.